And if you want people to never tell you when things are going sideways, bite their head off, right? Fire them, fire others as examples, do all that sort of stuff. Then people will quit bringing you the information that you need to make wise decisions and to be able to make progress.
Talked about this in previous episodes. What does it mean to care? It means you value what they say. They may bring you something that is contrary to what you are planning for the group or planning for the people you're leading. Listening to be persuaded of what am I missing? What are my blind spots?
Welcome to Science of Leadership, where we discuss the art of leadership and examine the science behind it to help you grow and lead better, wherever you are and whatever your role. I'm Tom Collins, and I'm joined by my friend and co-host, Justin Hamrick, and we are thrilled to have you join us on this journey to becoming a better leader. Justin, when you think of leadership and organizational structures, where do you picture the leader?
I think when you ask me that, I think my reflex answer would be at the top. I think of where's the general, where's the admiral, and if you drew out a hierarchy, I would say at the top. But my test taking ability has led me to believe that you're asking that question because you have a different answer to it.
Ah, you are correct. I think the reality is you're not thinking of it any differently than most people when we think about organizational structures, hierarchies, things that like that, is that people tend to think of the leader, quote unquote, as someone in a position that's higher up than them. And I think that in a sense is part of this conflation of leadership and leadership position. And so I always try to differentiate those, but most of the time people do think of the leader as being in some higher position and leading down, guiding the team of people they report to. So I think I think you're right on track with most people, but thinking about leadership more broadly, as we've covered in other episodes, really fundamentally it's about influencing others to achieve a common goal. So that's not attached to hierarchy. It's devoid of any kind of hierarchical constraints. And so I think that can help us open up a good conversation today.
It strikes me on a conversation I heard on ESPN this weekend when, you think about a football team, there's the head coach, offensive defense coordinators, and then the general on the field is the quarterback. But they were talking about this one team and they were talking about the center, the person playing center on the offensive line. And they made the quote, he's a real leader in the locker room. Now that is devoid of, like you said, his position. Like if you gave someone, a blank thing and said, write the leader of this football team, they probably wouldn't say the center, but the way they described it, everyone in that organization recognized this person because of the qualities that they enumerated during the conversation as being the leader of the team. So after you said that, immediately that came to mind.
Yeah, right. I mean, so it's not the position of authority or great fame or anything of that nature, right? It's leadership is a different thing. And so that's what I thought we'd talk about today with this idea of leading up.
Hmm.
Are you familiar with that
I thought it was a
concept?
book or something written like leading from behind, or I don't know. Maybe I'm confusing that with leaders eat last, but I've heard of this topic before of like not being in the organizational top of the chart, but having the qualities leading from within the organization, I guess.
Yeah, so when we talk about this idea of leading up, really what people are talking about, whether it's in, books, as you mentioned, there are some books out there that kind of hit on this and some, other, like, I think there are some other things out there that where people talk about this concept of leading up. But really what we're talking about is trying to influence those people who are, again, think about the hierarchical structure, who are in a hierarchical position above us, our quote
Hmm.
leader. We might even say our boss, right? And so thinking about how do we influence those people in this sense of leading up, which has become this idea of leading up is becoming more popular in in the literature. I would say the lay literature, and not so much in the scientific literature. I can't honestly find any studies where people have looked at that, um, but it is something that's gaining popularity. Some people might say managing up. I try to avoid the term managing
Hmm.
on our podcast because I don't want people to confuse leadership and management. But some places people might have heard is also managing up. And so what that really looks like is influencing the people that are above us so that they can accomplish this common goal, whatever the common goal is.
Hmm.
Sometimes it is that the person in the leadership position may not have the necessary skill set to do it. They may have arrived at that position because of some other skill set, and now they don't have the skill set to truly lead as well. And so helping them to see sometimes it's that they have some personal foibles, maybe they got character flaws or other things that lead them to that drive them to goals that are really not consistent with the overall organization or the group. And so it's influencing them so that we're actually all trying to achieve the common goal, if that makes sense.
So I guess the way you would define this leading from behind, leading up, is someone in a position not of inherent leadership in the hierarchical structure of whatever organization,
I would say authority.
influencing
Let's use the word
authority. I like that.
authority. Yeah.
Influencing others, specifically those above them in authority, to achieve a common goal.
Right. Yes.
I'm I am reminded of a word picture of many, many, many movies about war. One being Heartbreak Ridge with Clint Eastwood, where he's a gunnery sergeant, and the person above him in authority is a lieutenant who doesn't have his same skills of leadership. And how many times he's in there and he's like, the lieutenant says, "Let's do X," and he goes, "I think it might be best for us to do that for X, Y, and Z." And inherently, he gives his leadership, which is viewed by everyone in the organization as very strong, to someone that is in authority above him.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of a good example from the cinematic world of what it looks like, right? As I think about it personally, coming in this conversation, I think this is something that I feel like I've done for a long, long time. Um, is trying to lead up, and that looks like all the components that make for successfully leading up are things that I haven't intended to do, but I mean, in a sense, is just my natural bent of operation, but is try to develop a relationship with a person in the leadership position, try to be what I would say is a good lieutenant.
Mm,
Okay. And that's a concept I think we probably could roll around a bit is to be a great leader, you have to first be able to follow. I guess you could say to be a great follower as well, but you have to be able to follow. And I think that part of being a good follower is actually leading up. So in a sense, helping the person who's above you to do their job as leader as well as they can within your capabilities.
yeah.
That is, you're helping them as best you can within your capabilities to help them do the best job of leading within their capabilities and even beyond because you're, in a sense, sharing yours with them. That's something that I feel like I've always done. And it is, as you say, it's a bit like Heartbreak Ridge where you have someone and they say, "Oh, I think we should do X." And you come along and you say, "That could be an option. However, I've got some other data from the ground level that suggests maybe we should go a different way. And here's why." Then you're still moving toward the target that everybody's agreed on, the common goal, just more effectively because they didn't have the full perspective.
What do you think about what we've mentioned in a previous episode as it relates to this leading up? We talked about this in our sacrificial leadership episode, where you made a point of a leader reprimanding or criticizing in private, but celebrating in public. This leading up, because of the difference in authority, that it's not inherent. Do you think this is even more important to do these things when you're leading up? Or I guess I'd love to hear your thoughts on like what you think of how that fits in this particular concept.
I think that is a really important concept to discuss because in our hierarchy or our hierarchical thinking, I would say, it tends to be that we say, okay, this person in this position of authority is the leader, and so we're going to follow whatever they say. We don't want to undermine that person. I mean, if we're a good follower, we don't want to undermine the person, right? And so we talk to them outside of that environment, privately,
Mhm.
to say, hey, here's what I'm seeing. Here's what I think we should do. And if they're wise, then when they're in the larger context with people, they will say, it's come to my attention that maybe we should do these things. What do other people think? As opposed to just coming in and decreeing, this is what we should do. They get the inputs of all these other people, have a broader perspective, and then can act accordingly. And because they've taken the inputs of all these other people, they will actually have more buy-in from that group of people and be more likely to be successful, right? But we're going to do that. We're going to influence them. We're going to discuss and lead up outside of that public arena because otherwise, I think we would be undermining their
Yeah.
authority. That may be different in different contexts. Like there are some places in the Silicon Valley where people are expected to hash it out right there in front of everyone, right? In startup modes and that sort of thing, where it's a flatter hierarchy. Um, but even still, I think it's unwise unless you do it with exquisite care. You're at risk of undermining your leader in front of everyone else, and
Yeah.
that will certainly be unlikely to go well. Let me pause here for a second and remind our listeners that my book, The 4 Stars of Leadership, is now available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and essentially all online outlets. It's getting rave reviews, and I'm certain you will find it not only informative, but also inspiring. So I hope you'll order your copy today. Now let's get back to this interesting conversation.
What about the opposite of it? We sort of talked a little bit about how to lead up what we consider being a good follower, which I think really keys on it's not blind acceptance. It's if I see the guy in front of me about to step into a hole, I'm going to stop him. I'm going to care for them just as I care for the other people on the team. But let's say you're at the top of the authority. How do you allow and encourage leading up to you? Like how we've talked a little bit about being the person in an organization that's a little lower. How do you encourage if you're in the higher authority position of encouraging people in your team to lead up?
Well, that's a really, I mean, that could be multiple podcast episodes, I think. Let me first say, when you're at the top, quote unquote, General Darren McDew told me, you always have a boss.
Hmm.
So even when you're at the top, quote unquote, you have something, it may be someone,
Yeah.
but you have someone or something to which you are accountable. Okay. Now, in our government, that may be the Constitution of the United States of America and the citizens of the United States of America. In some other organization, it may be the vision of the organization. It may be your customer. It may be, in our case, patients, right? An ideal in a sense. So you always have a boss. So that's one thing that came to mind. I wanted to share with credit to General McDew. Now back to this thing of how do you facilitate or empower those that you lead to lead up? I think the first thing is you have to expressly state that's an expectation.
Hmm.
I expect you. We're terrible in general in society of delineating expectations of people. If you don't tell people what you expect of them, you cannot expect to get that, right? And so we're terrible about delineating expectations, but we should tell people what we expect. I expect you to tell me if I'm about to step in a hole. I expect you to tell me
Hmm.
when I'm about to go off track. And then the imperative thing is when they do, you say, thank you. I really appreciate that. You don't defend, you don't belittle, you don't respond in a negative way. You take it and say, thank you for that. And then, as necessary, incorporate it into your action plan and how you behave. I think that what happens is people don't tell others, I need you to speak up. I need you to lead up in this scenario. And then when people do, they bite their head off. And if you want people to never tell you when things are going sideways, bite their head off, right? Fire them, fire others as examples, do all that sort of stuff. Then people will quit bringing you the information that you need to make wise decisions and to be able to make progress. It's people in leadership positions who have big egos and little character shoot themselves in the foot all the time with this sort of thing because they get rid of any kind of dissenting opinion or any information that disproves or contradicts whatever their perspective is. And so I think those are two things that we have to do as leaders is tell people we want them to tell us and then accept it when they do. Accept it graciously when they do.
Yeah, it gets back to so many of the C's of leadership you talk about. We've talked about this in previous episodes. What does it mean to care? It means you value what they say. I mean, this is such an example of that, of like they may bring you something that is contrary to what you are planning for the group or planning for the people you're leading, but to be like, you know what? I respect this person. I care about this person. I want to hear them out. And to go in with a listening to be persuaded of what am I missing? What are my blind spots? man, it's so valuable when your team will do that for you, but that's a real quick way to get them not to do it is to punish them for it. Well, you disagree with me. We're not going to do that.
Right.
Even if you still come to the same conclusion you had before, devaluing what they said or their viewpoint as it didn't matter anyway, even if it doesn't change your algorithm for your decision making, that's big.
Yeah. So, but moving back to us being the ones leading up,
Mhm.
I think as I think about leading up, I think it's, getting to the importance of it, right? Because we've kind of described what it is, but getting to the importance of it as it pertains to whatever organization we're in, whatever thing we're a part of, on some levels, certainly, and I'm probably thinking about this more from these life and death scenarios, whether it's in our field of medicine, whether it's in military or otherwise. But I think that leading up is arguably a moral imperative because I think for those of us who are leaders or who want to be leaders, that means we want our group or our organization or our country or whatever unit of people we choose to be successful. And the reality is there are no human organizations that don't have the wrong people in one or more leadership positions. And so if we look at what's going on in our society currently, I think that's never been truer. This idea that there are no organizations without the wrong people in one or more positions of leadership. So I think we have plenty of people who have no business in being in leadership positions, whichever field, domain, whatever it is. And I think in such circumstances, it's again, it's morally imperative in a sense. It's a vital thing if the organization if the organization is to succeed for us to lead up.
Not to keep going back to previous podcasts, but and struck by when you're saying that how much leading up takes two qualities. And one is humility of the leader and sacrificial leadership. Because I can see the example if you are leading up, you can either choose for the health and success of the organization, or very easily you could say, I've got better ideas. I can undermine this person that's in a position above me so that I can succeed, probably to the detriment of the organization. But like to bring those things in private to really try to get the organization and the entire leadership team to succeed, it's going to take some humility and possibly sacrificial leadership from leading up to really do that. Because you may have the time to be like, they're going to step in a hole. You know what? I'm going to let them step in that hole. I'm going to let everybody see them fail because I should be doing that. I should be doing, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
It really, more so than a lot of things we've talked about, takes humility and sacrificial leadership to lead up. Probably more so than some of the other things that we've talked about previously.
Yeah, I think so because you are depending on the person with whom you're working and the person you're trying to lead up to, you're putting yourself at risk, professionally or otherwise. You also are if whatever thing you bring forward to this person, if this person isn't necessarily a person of the highest character, they may take credit for your idea, right? And that happens not infrequently in organizations, especially highly competitive organizations where the the leader says, "That's a great idea," and then they purvey it as their own. That undermines the entire thing because as a person leading up, you're not gonna trust that person anymore, right? So you're gonna be less likely to bring those good ideas. But it is, as you say, it requires some sense of humility and service to the larger mission than yourself, right? I think that's fundamental to leading up is that you see the larger mission as something greater than what you're trying to do individually. And so you're helping to move that larger mission forward by going to the person leading and saying, "Hey, here's what I'm seeing. Maybe we should think about this. Maybe we should do that. Maybe this idea that we have isn't exactly the best." And again, you may never get any credit for it or whatever, but ultimately it's did you accomplish the goal of the organization?
I'm struck by how much encouraging leading up will, by default, engage everyone in the organization. Because then they start to think about, I'm just coming to work, somebody else is going to take care of XYZ, but they see issues or problems or chances for improvement or the organization, and they're looking to solve them, no matter what their position in the authority or hierarchy of the group, assuming, like you've said before, that the person they're leading up to accepts it and doesn't dismiss it. But as encouraging leading up, just how much power the team can become because they're all looking to lead. They're all looking to lead, and instead of having 2 eyes on it, now you got 50 eyes looking around at all of your problems and all your potential solutions. It's so important for an organization and all the people in it to really encourage leading up. I mean, everything we've talked about previously of engagement, things like that.
Yeah, it reminds me of Kaizen, right? This that Toyota has used for decades for total quality management, right, and improvement. And this is coming from a culture that's an honor culture about saving face. So you would never come to your leader and say, "Hey, I think that this is wrong. I think we
Mhm.
should do this. My idea is whatever." I mean, people have flown planes in the sides of mountains because in from Southeast Asian countries because the co-pilot couldn't embarrass the pilot, that the pilot was making an egregious mistake. And so people have flown planes into mountains. I mean, it's incredible the power of that. But yet, in Toyota, coming out of that very strong culture, has this system where the person on the assembly line can stop the whole thing and say, "There's a problem here. We need to change this. We need to fix this." And that's fundamentally, in a sense, is a form of leading up.
Mhm.
Is to say, "Hey, I've identified this problem. Let's work together to fix it." It's giving everybody. Earlier I mentioned the word empowerment, right? You've got to empower the people to speak up to you. It's empowering everybody to say, if there's an issue, please bring it forward. And so often in hierarchical structures, that's exactly the opposite of what people do. They say, I don't have, that's not anything that I need to hear. You're off the rails. You don't know what you're talking about, whatever. As opposed to stopping and saying, hey, that's something that's a good idea. Let's look into it.
So, how'd they do that? Like, how do we, especially if we come from a culture which is not that empowering of everyone in the group, how do you change that culture to encourage leading up, to get that in people's minds of it's okay for you to see a problem that I didn't see. I mean, that's what the person on the line in Toyota could do. This they're essentially saying, I see a problem that somebody who set this up didn't see or hasn't recognized. So how do we do that? Like, I mean, we talked about empowerment, but like technically, like, how do we do that?
Yeah, I mean, from the Toyota side, I think it was removing blame.
Mm,
This is this person's fault, right? It's the system. So W. Edward Deming was the guy. He was an American guy who came up with these concepts, and Americans didn't buy into it. And the Japanese were like, "This guy's brilliant. Come over here and teach us this." And so he went over and he
I love
did.
that the leading up is in a position where the people around him weren't encouraging leading up. So he went somewhere
Well,
else.
he was. It wasn't leading up that he was doing. It was just this idea of how to create a system that was total quality management and was always looking to improve at the ground level, right? But anyway, so there it was removal of the individual responsibility to make it more systemic. And we're doing that more and more in medicine, right? We recognize that most of the big problems that we have are system problems. And so I think that if we're going to make greater impact, it's with leading up. It's not, hey, you've screwed this up. You've got this wrong. It's here's what I'm seeing in our system that I think we can adjust or we could move. Here are the data that I'm getting from these different people that I think are really important to this decision. So that the system is this person's in a position where they're not getting all the information and you're bringing some of that information to them, right? As opposed to like, hey, you don't know what you're doing. So I think that's a part of it. Okay, is that you take the personal sting away from it, um, and as far as how to do it, there, as far as leading up, that is, there are a couple of books. One of which I have. I mean, I've got both of the ones I'll mention, but and have read them. But one's this book, "Influencing Without Authority." That's by Alan
Mm,
Cohen and David Bradford, and I'll share a little bit of their thoughts. The other is called "Leading Without Authority" by somebody named a guy named Keith Ferrazzi. Um, and I'll include those in the description, show notes, and things. But as far as the influencing without authority, Cohen and Bradford talk about, they delineate what they call the approach to influencing your boss, and they have four things that they enumerate. One is see the boss as a potential ally or partner. I think that I think that's important because a lot of times we see them as, at least hearing other people. I think having seen my parents in roles where they had a boss, like a legitimate boss, and who was over them and was very authoritative in these kind of negative relationships, it wasn't that that person was an ally or partner. They were the and when you see sitcoms or other movies or things, the boss is hardly ever somebody who's on your side,
Mm,
right? And so if you don't see them as somebody who's on your side, you're not gonna try to help them, and leading up is about helping them. Fundamentally, leading up is about helping your leader to do a better job. So you gotta see them as a potential ally or partner or friend even, right? So that's number 1. Number 2 is understand the boss's world. What are their goals? What are their pressures? What are the things that they're having difficulties with? A lot of times we don't engage and try and understand what are the pressures and the problems that our boss is facing. It's just me, me, me. What are my problems? You're supposed to help me with my problems. And that's true, but the reality is they have issues they're dealing with. What are those issues? What are their goals? Because if we can understand those, then we can actually help them with those. And as we help them with their issues, then they will say, here's somebody who actually is helpful. And then we gain influence with them, right? The third thing that Cohen and Bradford list is be aware of the resources or currencies, that's the word they use, you already have and can acquire.
hmm.
And again, that gets to how can you make their job easier? And how can you not be a drain on them? What you already have that you can activate to achieve what you need to achieve, which then will help them achieve what they need to achieve. Or what are the things that you have at your disposal that they may not realize that you can help them with to achieve other things, right? And then the fourth thing is pay attention to how your boss wants to be related to. So this gets into some of that cultural stuff I was talking about earlier. In Southeast Asian honor cultures, saving face is really important. You don't just go up to them and say, "Hey, you screwed this up royally" in the middle of group, right? Or even in private. You have to. It's a very nuanced approach. Whereas in Silicon Valley, in a certain organization, not all organizations in Silicon Valley by any stretch, but in certain organizations in Silicon Valley, it is hash it out right there in front of everybody. So it depends on how that person wants to be related to, and it always needs to be respectful. You know, get their perspective, share yours, but do it in a manner that's really respectful. So those are four things that Cohen and Bradford really delineate again in what they call the approach in this book, Influencing Without Authority. For me, as I've thought about how I've influenced without authority for most of my career or even my life, I guess, it's it's always I mentioned this earlier, it's always been predicated on relationship because we can't influence people unless they trust us, and they won't trust us unless we have a relationship with them. And so it's getting to know people, spending time with them, to Cohen Bradford's things, understanding their pressure points and what they're facing. How can you alleviate that in whatever way you can? How can you not add to it in some form or fashion? I think all those things are things that I've done. Again, I wasn't necessarily thinking, "Oh, how do I lead up?" It's just that's just kind of naturally who I am, I guess. I don't know how to explain it, but I've always felt like I need to be a good lieutenant. As long as I can remember, I've thought that. And by that I mean a good follower who's actually doing things to help the leader out. So I'm
Mhm.
always saying, "Hey, um, I've heard these things, these murmurings." You don't tell who they came from or anything like that. De-identify it, anonymize it. But you say, "I've heard these things. I've got these data I think that are really important to what you're trying to do, and I think that it's important to pay attention to, and it may have impacts on how you're thinking about things moving forward, so forth." Um, and I have seen that be effective in having influence. It wasn't necessarily influencing towards something that I was wanting per se, other than the success of our team or our organization. Because again, I'm trying to be a good follower and a good lieutenant. And so that's something I've always kind of done. I don't know where that comes from. I don't know that somebody said, here's how you do this. I don't remember that ever being an action item. Okay, learn how to do this.
I think I'm always struck by the people that I know who I think are really good at leading up, how they never come with just the situation in hand. They almost always come with a solution. It may not be the right solution, but like you said, they have come with the resources that they have available in their arsenal to try to help the organization period. Hey, I'm seeing this. I know we didn't really talk about it before. You didn't mention it before, but I see this issue. I think maybe we should do this. Like in an obviously a nuanced approach, but bringing not only situations but solutions also.
I agree. I think a lot of times when people are, in leadership positions, they just hear a bunch of negative, a bunch of complaining, right? Like, "Hey, fix this for me. I need this thing. Give me the goodies," whatever it may be. When you come with a problem, if you don't have evidence that you've thought about it and tried to, at least you don't have to have a solution, actually. You just need to demonstrate that you've tried to generate one.
Mm,
I've thought about this. I'm not, you can even say, I've put a lot of thought in this. I'm not certain how we fix it, but here's the problem I'm seeing, and I'm ready to try to help in whatever way. But if you can come with some sort of nascent idea of how you might approach it, then that's going to show your leader that you have given it thought, that you, to the point that you see it as important, that you're not necessarily blaming or complaining or something like that, but that you see it as a legitimate problem that needs to be solved and you're willing to invest in solving it. I think that goes so far in influencing the leader and demonstrating that, hey, yeah, I do actually see this as a problem. If you're just coming with, here's this thing, and you haven't, this complaint or this problem, quote unquote, that you're seeing, but you haven't given enough thought as to how might it be addressed? What are the causes of it? I mean, again, you don't necessarily have to have the answer, but you may be able to say, here are the causes I've identified, because once you've identified the causes, then you can identify how to fix it, right? You need to know what caused it if you're going to fix it. That shows an investment on your part and that you've given time and that you actually think that it's legitimately an issue that needs to be addressed. And that will take you so much further than just coming and being like, here's a problem I'm going to dump in your lap.
it seems like in leading up, how much more weight when you bring up issues, concerns, whatever that don't concern you personally and aren't isolated to your silo, but that you have seen as you're looking out to how can the organization succeed? How can the leadership structure succeed? How can everyone succeed? How much more weight that carries, especially even if it's to your detriment, whatever it may be.
You're right. If you only come to your leader and you only talk about something that is a problem for you or that's getting in your way of success
Mm,
and not on a bigger scale, not a bigger picture, not on, hey, I've noticed this thing over here. And if we address that, we'll be better as an organization. If it's always focused on you, then you're complaining.
yeah.
You may be
Complaining
disguising
up.
it. Yeah, complaining up. That's right. You may be disguising it as trying to be helpful or whatever, but at the end of the day, you're just trying to help yourself. And I think leading up is more diffuse. Again, it's what is the goal of the leader? The goal of the leader is to help all those they lead do great things. I think that's what I would say. But that doesn't mean giving you everything that you want because you only have a certain number of resources and you need to distribute those equitably across the group. And so if you're only coming boo-hoo, boo-hoo, I see this problem that just affects me. Yeah, that's not going to go very far.
So, Tom, we've obviously talked about a lot of different points of this concept of leading up. But if we're going to leave our listeners with two take homes, one, how to encourage those you are leading to lead up, and how, as the person leading up, how to effectively do that. What take homes would you give for our listeners?
Yeah, I think for both of those, um, take home relationship. You need to have a good relationship with those you're leading and those who are leading you, because in that scenario, then there is communication that's effective. Without that relationship, it's really not going to be nearly as effective, if at all. So that's one thing. The second thing is, again, reiterating a couple points that I made when you're trying to have those that you lead up, empower them to actually do it by setting that expectation. Hey, I need you to lead up. I need you to tell me when there's a problem, when you see issues. Come to me. Second, do not respond in a negative manner. When they do it, thank you for sharing that with me. That's very important. I value your input. Let's look into it. Okay. That's what I would say as far as encouraging people to lead up to you. And then activate on it, I guess is a third thing I didn't say earlier, but actually do something about it when they bring you important information. That's that's what I would say there. As far as how do we lead up, again, I talk about relationship. I think, it's see your leader as somebody who is on your side, as an ally, as a partner. Do your best to understand the things that they are dealing with. Don't add more junk to their plate. Try to help them with the things they're dealing with and show them how you can be of assistance with whatever resources and currencies, again, that they may have. How can you make your leader's job easier? That's probably one statement that we can make. Um, in closing out, is the idea of leading up is, how do you make your leader's job easier with the resources and talents, whatever you have at your disposal? So I think those are things that would be good take homes. All right, Justin, I think it's a good place to wrap this thing up. Thanks for, I think, an interesting conversation. Again, since there isn't a lot of science on this particular topic per se, we were a little bit more fluid than our usual structure, but hopefully that's something that people enjoyed. Thank you for joining us on this episode of The Science of Leadership. We hope today's discussion has inspired you and given you valuable insights to help you become a better leader. Remember, leadership is about helping those we lead do great things. It's a journey of continual growth and learning. When we embrace that journey with curiosity, courage, and humility, we can confront challenges, overcome barriers, and foster environments where everyone can succeed. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow or subscribe, leave a comment, and share it with others who are passionate about leadership. Until next week, keep leading with character, competence, caring, and communication. This is Tom Collins. Let's keep growing.